Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be looking at topic 6 of the Diploma in Financial Studies. This is the 6th video in a series of 10 designed to look at each topic within Unit 3. Topic 6, of course, relates to the impact of global events and ethics, and within this video, we're going to be focused specifically on globalisation. So in part 1 of topic 6, we're going to cover globalisation. Within the other parts of topic 6, we'll cover the global economy, major world events, social change, ethical considerations, and the sustainability of the financial services sector. So, in part 1, the content we're going to cover. In this video, we're going to look at what globalisation is, as well as the factors driving it. We're going to look at the impacts of globalisation, including for consumers, businesses, UK financial services industry, and for developing countries. So, in order to set the scene, before we start looking at globalisation, it's important to know that the impact of events in one country can impact upon individuals in another. This will filter down to have an impact on the individual consumer. So what is globalisation then? Well, do you ever get that feeling that the world is becoming smaller? Not physically, but many years ago it used to take 6 or 7 weeks to travel to Australia by boat when planes couldn't make the journey. Nowadays, however, 24 hours and you'll be in Sydney. That is potentially due to the developments in transportation. Countries, economies, populations are becoming increasingly interconnected or reliant on other countries and economies and populations for the provision of their goods and financial services. What happens in one country is now much more likely than ever to affect what happens in another. So what drives this phenomenon we call globalisation? Well, information and communications technology, including the internet, has massively increased and massively developed in recent years, which has fueled the opportunity to globalise. Transportation, both in terms of air and sea, have also become much cheaper. Within sea transportation, for example, the phenomenon of containerisation has meant that containers have become standardised in weight, height and size the world over, which means that containers can be sent around the world very straightforwardly and very cheaply. Cheaper shipping, of course, has led to us being able to ship our products and services abroad very cheaply. There's also fewer trade barriers between countries. Things like the EU, the European Union, NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. These are all examples of free trade agreements between nations. The growth of multinational corporations has also been a driving factor behind globalisation. Corporations, companies that have expanded overseas into different countries. So what are some of the impacts of globalisation then? For consumers in developed countries, there are a number of impacts of this phenomenon of globalisation. Firstly, these individuals have a far greater amount of choice when it comes to purchasing goods and services, including financial services. They also have the possibility of purchasing these goods and services for much cheaper than if they were to purchase or buy them from domestic producers. They have the opportunity to travel freely across the world, and there's also the opportunity to work in other countries. So what about for businesses in developed countries? Well, there's a far greater opportunity for these businesses to produce products in countries where staff wages are lower than they are at home. There is also greater opportunity to produce products in countries where raw materials can be accessed easier or cheaper than in domestic markets. There's also the opportunity to enter new markets, including developing markets. These provide great opportunities for businesses in developed countries to significantly increase their sales and sales revenue. However, they may also be encouraged to locate production facilities in developing nations by governments in order to bring development and job opportunities to that developing nation. They may choose to make redundancies in the domestic workforce if work can be completed overseas for cheaper. There may also be increased competition from overseas businesses, including those which may benefit from government protectionism. This may mean, potentially, that these businesses in developed countries may actually have to compete with other businesses other than in their domestic market. And lest we forget, there is the potential for negative media attention if that business in a developed country is found to be exploiting workers in developing countries. So what about the impacts of globalisation for the UK financial services industry then? Well, there is of course a wider market to sell financial services to. This can vastly increase the potential for sales and of course the potential for profits. There is also the greater opportunities to raise capital, money from international money markets. This of course means that UK financial services can greatly benefit from raising money cheaply as compared to domestic markets. That said, it also increases the interdependencies of financial services not only within countries but across the world. Later on in the unit, we'll have a look at the opportunity and the possibility for systemic risk. There is also the opportunity to outsource or offshore certain tasks. For example, some financial services providers may choose to outsource or indeed offshore, which of course means outsourcing abroad, certain non-core activities. It might be things like payroll, for example. There's increased competition from overseas organisations. Of course, globalisation does not just mean that UK financial services industry can benefit, also there is competition from overseas which can benefit, including those which might benefit from government protectionism. May require significant amounts of market research in order to understand the new market's wants, needs and preferences. This is going to increase the cost to UK financial services industry, and therefore they might pass this cost on to their consumers. It also may require significant investment to develop products and services that meet the needs of global markets. Once again, if there's a cost involved, these will be passed on to consumers of that financial services organisation, potentially in the form of higher interest rates for borrowing and lower interest rates for savings deposits. As mentioned earlier, it will also increase the interconnectedness of global financial services. And if one particularly large organisation fails, then it's likely to have a great impact upon other financial services providers elsewhere in the world. What about for developing countries then? Well, globalisation for developing countries may bring the potential for job opportunities for local people. There's also the opportunity to access training and development opportunities if foreign organisations choose to locate in a country that otherwise may not be available. That said, there may be the potential for exploitation by foreign organisations if laws and regulations are not in place to stop exploitative behaviours. So now that we've looked at globalisation, let's check our knowledge. Before we do so, however, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to the channel to be notified when future videos are released, including case study reviews and full model answers. Question number 1. The international integration of business, industry and society through developments in technology, communication and migration is generally known as A. Globalisation, B. Offshoring, C. Outsourcing, or D. Trade expansion. The answer, of course, to question 1 is A. The international integration of business, industry and society through developments in technology, communication and migration is known as globalisation. Question 2. The International Monetary Fund has stated that the major factors in the development of globalisation have been advances in ICT and A. Increased competition, B. Increased trade liberalisation, C. Reduced communication, or D. Reduced exchange rates? The answer to question 2 is B. Increased trade liberalisation. Trade legislation in many countries has been relaxed to make international trade easier. Later on in the video series, we'll be looking at the WTO, the World Trade Organization, and how they have facilitated world trade. Question 3 asks which of the following activities of an investment fund management company is most likely to be outsourced? Is it A. Fund management, B. Insurance underwriting, C. Payroll, or D. Advertising? So when you're answering this question, think which of the following activities is not a core activity of an investment fund management company. The answer is C. Payroll is not a core activity, so can be undertaken by a third party. Make sure you click on the link to access the next video in the series.